Thank you very much, Martin. Ladies and gentlemen, very good evening. It is my utmost pleasure and privilege to be here tonight. I first delivered this workshop in the Division L mini conference / contest, and David and Carly were there, and they very kindly invited me. It's a little bit of a trek for me to get there because I live in southeast London, but I'm sure it's all worthwhile. It's always great to go to a new club, and I'm very pleased with what I saw today. Anyway, we've got a lot to cover, and just now, so let's just get back on. So, I'm going to start off by asking you all one simple question. Who here would like to become the world champion of public speaking, or to win a contest? That's pretty much everyone in the room. And when you do a speech contest, there are several criteria that judges use to allocate your place, first, second, or last. And what percentage of that is for the content of the speech, instead of just the delivery, the vulgarity, and so on? What percentage of content?
20%.
20%? Sorry?
33.
33? More answers?
40. 50.
Someone said 50. It is indeed 50%. So why am I spending so much time putting such an emphasis on this number? Because the content of the speech matters a lot in determining the quality of the speech. If it's going to be a good speech or a great speech or something that's really exceptional. There it matters a lot, vocabulary, body language, all the things we learn here. But the content matters just as much. And sometimes what can actually make the difference between good, great, or just not so good content is actually the subject or the speech. Or even more precisely, what was picked within the subject of the speech. So now I've got another question for you all. How do you find it to find subject for your speech? Is it easy, difficult? Do you struggle? Do you spend hours on end with it?
Sometimes you just I come up with half a dozen topics.
Yeah.
But then of course they like dreams,
They just
they
wither away.
wither away. And then other
Yeah.
times I can't think of anything to say at all.
Okay, so and
I suppose it
Yeah.
depends on how passionate you are about a subject.
that, I like this answer because you're very passionate about the subject. You've got a deep interest in the subject. That can make it a lot easier. Any more ideas, please? Corey or fellow DTM in the room.
Yes, I think if you're doing the first manual, the Competent Communicator Manual, I found that comparatively easy because
Yeah.
you can talk about yourself and you've got a fairly broad range of topics. When you get onto the advanced manuals and they're becoming more specific, I got a bit of writer's block then.
This is something we're going to cover indeed. The CC manual is very open, very flexible. When you do the advanced manual, writer's block indeed. I suffered that myself 2 years ago when I moved on to my first advanced manual, and I had like a bit of a pause for 3 months because I just didn't know what to cover on. Any more idea? Any more ideas? Yes.
I get the topics, but I kind of need to structure them well, so
Yeah.
the audience understanding, because they may have a different perspective,
Audience
and
understanding.
I think delivering that for the audience, it means that you need to put the bricks from the foundation, and you got to make a built-up structure for it.
Yeah, I mean, you could be very passionate. I like that answer as well. You could be very passionate, for example, about, say, steam trains or steam engine, but making this speech inspiring or entertaining for an audience can be very challenging indeed. So how do you pick up something? That's interesting because a lot of what you've said here tonight are stuff that I will be covering in a bit more detail later on. So I'm just going to move on again to another question. There are 2 major sources of speech topics, only 2. What are they? I mean, Carly and David have been to the first iteration of this workshop, so they're not allowed to answer, but what are they, please? Yes, please.
Personal experience.
Personal experience, indeed. What's the other one?
Not personal experience.
This is indeed pretty much it. You've got the personal experience, what has happened to you, and today I've had a bit of a weird day. I spilled water on my computer when I was working on it today. I had a long journey on the tube. These by itself could actually be topic for speeches if you on their own. If say something happens that you just see someone falling off on the train and but because they're drunk, I see that happening. That could be a very good topic for a humorous speech, for example. So in our own life, even on a daily basis, we could have countless things that actually make for very good speech topics. And the other ones are not personal experience, which we call references. You're reading a book, you're seeing a magazine article, or watching a movie. But I like this picture because what's happening with the water in that picture? They're converging, they're merging together. And very often, this is actually what just happens. You might be making a speech about yourself, but you will include things in the speech that don't necessarily have something to do about yourself directly. Say if you've read that book, you might ask why you're very passionate about that book. So things can blend to an extent, especially when you're writing a speech. Just to go up this table, so personal experience, your interest in your hobbies. If you have any interest, you can write about many things. Say you're interested in cooking or sewing, this could be the topic for speeches. You've got some pets maybe, you've got a cat that runs around the garden and kills birds everywhere. This could be a very good topic for a speech. A humorous speech there, the story of my serial killer cat that terrorized all the birds in Harrow and Millstone. Some stories from your own family or your own past perhaps, or your career. We all do jobs, and is it Lee in your name? Lily. In Lily's table topics earlier, we had a perfect example of a personal story, an anecdote that happened to her. That could morph into actually a very good speech. And then references, the news. We've had Brexit happening a fortnight ago. Plenty of speech topics there on Brexit. Informative, you could also blend them with personal experiences. For example, books, movies, say you've seen the latest Independence Day. I haven't, don't spoil it for me, please. This could be a good speech. Say yeah, the movie's interesting, but I just don't like the fact that the aliens are so powerful that they land on the Atlantic Ocean or something like that. There's a topic right there. Articles on the website, the newspapers. Speech topics are absolutely everywhere. Just grab them they are. They are everywhere ready to be used. But not all of them are necessarily as good as the others. So now I've done a few speeches at Toastmasters. I've done 51 speeches these last few months and years, and I've run a bit of an analysis just before coming here today on what were my sources actually. Where did I just plug them from? Books? Was it my interest? What was the breakdown of things? And actually, it made quite an interesting reading. Almost the majority were actually my own interest. I'm interested in science and in the London Underground. So it's very random, but I've done some speeches on that. And you can actually do some good speeches on your own interest because people are curious about you. We've just seen 2 speeches that add personal element, personal stories today. People, the audience, are interested in learning more about you, what you like, what you do. Myself, thing that happened to me, I did a speech, for example, on my first day at university and sharing room with strangers and all that. Very good speech topics there. Pure references. I mean, this one is a little bit more interesting to classify because these have been speeches which were purely from a book or a reference material and with very little personal elements added in. And these were actually especially the case for advanced speeches. If any one of you purchased the interpretive reading manual or did the interpretive reading manual? Yeah, I can see a few hands up. In this manual, you just cannot basically talk about yourself, you just cannot talk about your own interest. You've got to choose speech topics that are from books, from newspapers articles, that are pure reference, and then you've got to make us read it out loud to the audience. Now the subject of these different pieces of reading obviously will match with your own interest and with your own lives, but you don't really have a choice there, I think, of creating the content. You have to use pure references. Some of the other advanced speeches, one of them was a speech about you had to present like a conference paper to an audience. I had to plug something that I hadn't written and just see what was interesting and then make a speech out of it. There was very little personal element or anything that was my interest. I didn't do that. You might be wondering, hold on, you just said there's 2 sources, but I can see that there are 6 speeches over that. Some of these speeches were very specific because of their purpose. Like when I became president of one of my clubs, I did a speech from the CC manual and say, this is what's going to happen in a year, we're going to do blah, 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 and I got it evaluated as a normal speech. So it's like a very purpose-specific speech, which can actually happen very often if you're outside of Toastmasters. Humorous and entertaining speech can be a slight category on their own sometimes because they're derived from personal interest and so on, but they can be notoriously hard to classify sometimes. So I kind of deliberately choose to put it on their own. But if I look back to the humorous speeches I did, they kind of were about my own interest and were about, but you always have to stretch things somewhat to make it a little bit less plausible. And the funny thing about that is that a lot of the speeches that were about my own interest, as you probably have found yourself in writing speeches, you always have to do a bit of extra research because you're looking for some fact, for some information. We don't know it all. We don't have like supercomputers in our head that can put the information out of the way. So we've got to do some research as well anyway. So very often, as with the water picture, the boundaries can become quite blurred because when you do your research on the topic, you might find it interesting to be able to say, this would be good to add in my speech. I didn't know that. And then things change. So what subject have I spoken on? Just of a run through. I did a speech about McDonald's. It was quite a funny speech, but if you like, if you've been there, maybe you had a bad experience, you threw up everything afterwards. It's been instant speech topic. We're going to have the humor speech contest quite soon. You've got your speech topic there. I used to work in the nuclear industry. I'm still very interested in that industry. This has been the source material for very many of my own speeches. Myself, I did a fair few speeches about myself, my life so far. I personally find that these speeches are the hardest one for me to do because it can be very hard to reveal yourself and bare yourself to an audience. So whenever people do that, especially in tonight's break, which are very personal speeches, I would really recommend that to you guys because it's going to be very, very hard to do. Shakespeare has been my pure reference for a lot of my intuitive reading speeches. And the good thing about doing a speech based on Shakespeare or reading Shakespeare in Toastmasters is that it really forces you to work out your language, your rhetorical devices, and your vocabulary, especially if it's a play with many different characters and you have to do them all with your voice. It's good fun, but it's very challenging. Train travel, train being delayed. We've all been there, done that on the t-shirt. Just speak about it. Maybe you met your husband or wife on a delayed train. Maybe you just found that people start speaking to each other on the tube when something happens. Speech topic right there. Now, what lessons have I learned so far when doing all of that? And if I just boil down to 3 main things I've learned, it would be as follows. Never hesitate to speak about yourself, about what you love. Even if it can be a slightly obscure interest, say you're interested in steam engine, or in sewing, or in making dresses, or in baking cookies or scones. This is a good topic. You like doing it. So when you're on stage, you will have the energy, you will have the enthusiasm, and you will be smiling, and you could have the scones, everything you're making as visual aid and as props. Angela likes props, I'm sure she'll be very happy. So don't hesitate to do that. Because props are a far better form of visual aid than using this, in my humble opinion. In Toastmasters, you can speak about almost anything. I know in some clubs they say no politics, no religion. It's not the case in the clubs I'm a member of, and I would say it's completely fine to speak about politics or religion at Toastmasters, as long as it is done within certain boundaries, so to speak. So don't deliberately go to offend people, make people feel uncomfortable. You can speak with, say, I voted to leave Europe or something like that. You can make a speech about that, but be be PC, bear in mind your audience at all time, be respectful of it, but this could be a good speech topic because it will pique the interest of people and people will get to know you more. And the last one and the most important one is you should harness the natural curiosity of people. People are curious. The best way to open a conversation with someone can also be, what do you think about this? Or have you seen what has just happened in the street? What do you think? People are curious. If you ask them a question, and they will want an answer to that question. Use this to your advantage. People want to know about you, they want to know about what you're doing, they're curious to know something about even pretty obscure thing. But I've got one final thing to say as well on this topic, which is always follow your intuition. As David said, sometimes you just come up with 6 ideas at the same time because you've got like a light bulb moment. When that's the case, piece of paper and write it down. Because otherwise, it will be lost forever. Because a bit of organization, but you have no. It happens to me. I've had ideas, I've lost them. We've all been there. Capture the idea. Go ahead. Write an outline. Maybe just explain what happened, and then go ahead and just write your speech. Follow your intuition. Now, as we kind of discussed already a little bit earlier in terms of the various components of a speech, there are some constraints at Toastmasters when it comes to speaking. What are they? Over to you. What are the main constraints we face when speaking at Toastmasters that we would not face when speaking over there in a big red word?
Time.
Time, it's a huge one. Any more?
Confidence in front of a bigger audience.
Yeah, I mean, if you speak outside of Toastmasters, you may have an even bigger audience. So that's you will always have to face an audience. This is always going to be a constraint. But yes, Mick.
Yeah, familiarisation. You can get familiar with the Toastmasters, particularly in the club.
Yeah.
Once you step outside of the club, and whereas we all encourage each other, it's more likely in the real world you won't have everybody encouraging you and on side. So you may have people you've got to convince that they may be neutral.
This is a very good point, but I really want to know the specific constraint that we face here at Toastmasters, not necessarily outside in the big red world. Some hands up, lady at the back.
Word of the day.
Word of the day, yes. But you can ignore the word of the day. You don't have to incorporate the word of the day. I haven't said nincompoop today. I said it, but you can ignore it, Jill.
Whether it's a humorous speech or whether it's the speech contest, you have to stay within the constraint of what the order of that competition is.
The objective of the project.
Objective of the project. Yes, please.
It's constructive criticisms.
Constructive criticism and Satya.
Counting the ahas and
Yeah, well, it's not. It's more to do with the delivery rather than choosing the subject. Yes, Richard?
It's maybe slightly unorthodox, but the size of the room and the size of the audience, as soon as you step out into a bigger room and a bigger audience, your projection can often get lost. I notice Toastmasters often constrained by their projection. Their speeches are more conversational because it's an intimate environment. Whereas you step into a room for 300 people and you haven't practiced your projection, which is unconscious, then you're limited by that.
Yeah, and Angela?
captivating the audience.
Captivating the audience. It's all very, very interesting answers, but if you look at the constraint we face specifically at Toastmasters, number one is the time limitation. 5, 6, 7 minutes. If you do a speech in a big red room, you're not going to be speaking for 5, 6, 7 minutes. I mean, I was looking at some of the speech that the Conservative candidate to become the next PM did. Michael Gove did a speech that was 4,000 words long. This is going to be like an half an hour speech at the very least. I would argue personally this is way too long a speech for this purpose, but if you do a speech outside in the big world, 10 minutes, 15, 20 minutes tends to be the ballpark. In 5, 6, 7 minutes, there's not actually a lot that we can cover, and this is a big constraint. Now, this is one that it was controversial when I talked about it in the last workshop, but the availability of visual aids. if you want to do a speech like some technical presentation manual, you need visual aids. Some clubs don't always have a projector. I mean, you guys have got a lot of equipment there. You're all set to go, but that's not the case in every club. There are some clubs where that equipment is simply not available. So if you want to do a speech with some graphs and a lot of numbers, you'll have to reconsider your subject or the way you present it, because you're just not going to have that capacity to project information. The audience at Toastmasters are very diverse. This is an amazing thing because more diverse audience means more points of view. But the corollary of that is more points of view means you may have to be careful on some topic, because you don't want to offend people deliberately or unconsciously. So this can be something to be aware of. I've never really seen a situation myself where someone offended someone else in a Toastmaster meeting with a speech. In 3 years of being a member, I've never seen that, but I am aware of instances where this has happened. So one can be slightly careful. It's unlikely it would happen, but it's best to be careful. And yes,
just an example, not of offending people, but at this club in table topics, somebody we had the theme of St Patrick's Day, which was the patron saint of Ireland, and one of the questions it asked, in a fight between a leprechaun and a smurf, who would win? And of course the person who asked had no idea what a leprechaun was or a smurf. So it's like knowing your audience.
it is also something because some people who come to Toastmaster meeting, especially in Central London, are not native English speakers. I'm not a native English speaker myself, but I've been living in this country for 11 years, so I'm pretty much immersed now. But some people, they might be fresh out of the boat, they want to improve their English, and if you do a speech on a very complex subject or use very complicated word, they're going to be lost. I did a humorous speech once about the differences between England and Scotland, basically, and I used some words of Scottish jargon there. The native British people got it, but half of the people were not British and they just didn't laugh. They just didn't get it. That could be something to consider as well.
Can I just ask, you've done that presentation there. It's very diverse audience, more on we can't see it.
More on that later.
More
on that later. We'll speak about the importance of the audience later. Just thanks for pointing that out. By the way, I know that there is a spare feedback form that you all have that is probably meant for me. I have printed some as well myself. Please fill it in, give me some feedback. This is the second time I'm doing this workshop. Hopefully there'll be a third time and I want to make it even better. So your feedback will help you there. So don't hesitate, speak to me afterwards, write me some feedback please, and I will type it in and collect it later tomorrow. And the objectives. When you're doing advanced manuals, so the speeches by management manual, or the persuasion manual. I haven't done these, but I've seen some of the objectives, they're all online. They can be tough. Because you have to role play some situation. There's a speech where you have to role play a cold call. Apparently, I've seen it being done once. Speaking topics for these speeches can be a lot more challenging. Whereas the CC manual is very open. Pop your own call. Just go ahead with it, and you can speak about anything. Now, at the same time, there are many opportunities at Toastmasters, and we've already touched upon these earlier. The CC manual is very open because it's all about practicing your basic skills. The objectives are not really prescriptive in terms of what you're going to be speaking about. If you look at the technical presentation manual, one of the projects is speak about a complex subject and make it simple to the audience. This is one of the objectives. So you've got to speak on something complex right from the start. I've done that project and I found it quite challenging. You can talk about anything you want in Toastmasters. You've already said that, but it never ceased to amaze me the diversity of speech topics I've seen in all the meetings I've been to, in all the clubs I've been to. I've had speeches on food, about people's life journeys, on people's life interest, on their job, on all the travel they've been to, drinking bottles of spicy sauce in Bolivia. It never ceased to amaze me. So go ahead and run ahead with it. This is your chance. And personal speeches are also very welcome. We actually value the fact that people open up at Toastmaster. We're very supportive of that. I've seen that tonight in this club, and I see it in pretty much all the other clubs I've been to in London. So this is a very good thing, because if you would be speaking outside of Toastmaster and you just make a speech about yourself, your life struggle, this could be seen as motivational, but this could also, people will just say, what's the point, basically. You have that chance to do that at Toastmaster. And the audience is non-judgmental as well. So basically, to an extent at Toastmaster, you can ignore your audience. To an extent only. As long as you don't offend them, but people will be nice to you at Toastmaster. Having said that, I've had a very tough evaluation once for the person that sort of insult me. It was not related to St. Patrick's, but it wasn't a good experience. But people are nice at Toastmaster. Now, obviously, picking a speech topic is quite a big thing, and I've just said, there's two main topics. Can we just narrow it down to some more components in terms of what really makes a speech good and great, instead of just being an average or just an okay speech? And the analogy I would like to use is actually the analogy of light. If you look at white light is actually made up of many different types of light. Red, all the colors of the rainbow come together to make some white light. If you just run a spectroscopy thing on these lights, for example, we'll see some amazing things. And a speech is actually just the same thing. A good subject, a good speech, a good content is a component of many different things that all come together to make something very successful. And another analogy we can use is the RGB, the color thing. And with red, green and blue, you can do all the different colors of the rainbow. You can do millions and millions of colors just based on these three colors and these three criteria. Now, could it be that we can use three main criteria as well for picking good speech topic and good speeches? And the answer is yes. And we'll be covering these criteria one by one now. And the other way to view it is a sieve, where you just start at the top, you put in a lot of stuff, and it goes through. The first thing is the knowledge. Your knowledge of the subject. Super important when speaking a speech topic. This is the first sieve, and this is actually the coarser one, you could argue. Second one, find a mesh. The emotion. Is there an emotional impact on the subject you will be speaking about? Because if you don't build up an emotional connection with your audience, if the speech is quite dry, people are not going to be interested. And the last one is the audience. What audience will you be speaking to? What is the knowledge level of the audience? What are the background of the audience? This does matter in Toastmaster, not in terms of the cultural background, but more the life background of the people, the average person. And we'll be covering these one by one. So the first one is the knowledge. So, timekeeper, how much time have I spoken for so far?
28.
28. So we're going to have 5 minutes to brainstorm what I mean by knowledge, and what are the key criteria to consider on knowledge. So 5 minutes of kind of, you can chat amongst yourself, you can chat to me, let's just have a discussion.
Personal knowledge of yourself.
Personal knowledge of yourself, knowledge of the topic is knowledge. It's quite broad.